So now that we have explored a couple of options for security, for the data storage, for persistence, and for the serverless deployment of the solutions, now let's go ahead and take a look at how our solutions and their development or deployment can be automated on the Azure platform and how we can integrate these services inside the DevOps environments. So in this section, we will go ahead and take a look at the overall Azure automation, which is definitely an infrastructure as a service level solution by Azure. We will then go ahead and understand the concept of infrastructure as code, which will bring us to the topic of Azure Resource Manager, which is the solution by Azure for infrastructure as code management. And from there, we will go ahead and discuss the Azure DevOps as a service and take a look at how it can help us automate our deployment processes. First off, let's go ahead and try to explore what infrastructure as code actually means. To understand the concept of infrastructure as code, one first has to understand what it means by the code in the term. By the code, what it means is that your deployment template basically is a serialized representation of your overall infrastructure, which contains different resources such as the virtual machines, the storage accounts, your virtual networks, your VPNs, your gateway information, as well as the configuration for your virtual machines. The serialized format for the overall infrastructure basically is stored as a JSON file or YAML file. Other tools might have their own format for the storage. Some might even have a scripted format for the storage of the resource template, but we will be focusing on the JSON templates that are used by Azure. So if we try to cover up the infrastructure as code, it's basically used to version control your infrastructure as well as the configurations used in each of the version of the infrastructure. This means that the overall profile of your infrastructure, which is deployed on the cloud or on premises, is stored as a serializable data such as JSON or YAML files. It enables your operational teams to version, label, tag, and share the infrastructure within the team or within the organization. This also enables you to store an active state of your infrastructure so that you can roll back to a previously deployed state in case you ever find some issues with the current deployment state. There are so many tools that are available to perform these actions such as Ansible, Chef, Puppet, even the custom tools that are deployed and are available on a specific vendor such as the Azure Resource Manager. Since we are talking about infrastructure as code, it would be a very best practice if your infrastructure as code template is platform agnostic. There would be no benefit in the infrastructure as code management if your infrastructure is only deployable on a specific vendor. So you must always go ahead to a cross-platform solution. Also, your infrastructure as code template must be human readable. So when it is stored in the string format, such as in JSON or YAML, a developer must be able to configure these settings himself without having to depend upon a tool to be used. It must be easier to revision or version your infrastructure so that your operational team can study the overall behavior of resources inside the infrastructure. And since we are talking about the revisions, your infrastructure as code template must also be very easier to roll back any changes that were not necessary or that have broken your overall infrastructure performance. It must also be deployable on each of the cloud vendor, so it must not be depending upon a cloud vendor itself or the hardware that can accept the solutions. Last but not least, it must also have some support either from community or from the product developers themselves so that you are not left out in case you ever face some issues with the overall product development as well as the deployment. And on Microsoft Azure, we have Azure Resource Manager, which is provided out of the box as a solution and has its own template for infrastructure as code management.